my name is Dr. Tanga Odoi. I'm a Ugandan who has lived for over 50 years in Uganda since birth. I am an historian by training. An historian means I analyze historical issues and put them in context. I'm also the chairman of the NLM Electoral Commission since 2015. First of all, I'm blessed to be a young Ugandan who has seen Uganda at 3 stages. I saw Uganda as a little boy in primary 5 to primary 7, when my own father, the late Yokolam Tanga, was being hurtled and beaten out of his house by the Amin regime for not any sin, but for being a chief, or for having been a chief in the Obote regime. I also saw my father kicked around and his plate of food thrown away, just because he asked a question as to why the soldier had grabbed my book. We were at table, my father was eating, but we were doing our homework. Now when the soldier, I remember his name was Apiliga, not Abiliga, Apiliga, asked why Muzei is not attentive, Muzei said, I'm listening to you, but my children are also doing work, so may we move and I talk to you, I leave them do work. They grabbed his plate of food, banged it down on the floor, grabbed my book and tore it in pieces. I remember that vividly. I was in P5. Then they picked my father. Amidst my mother's cries, our mothers have 4 mothers, but they took him to the barracks. Then they brought him the same night alive. We thought they were bringing us a body, but they brought him alive in the Land Rovers. And once the Land Rovers were coming, 2 of them, you would actually vision it quickly by seeing the lights in the sky. My father has not been recognized as a hero, but my father did commendable work. Because then Amin was looking for Obote supporters. And my father, being a chief and an Anglican, because Obote was associated with Anglicans, he was being hurtled for being an Obote supporter. 1971 to 1976 were very difficult years for us as a family. But my father stood the ground. He did not resign, but he kept on praying that change must come to Uganda. Now, when change came in Uganda with the liberation of 1979, we thought at last the family was going to be peaceful again. Instead, there was again a new wave of attack, locally orchestrated by a special district administrator then, who was actually fomenting conflict between the Catholics and the Anglicans in Toronto as his modus operandi in his administration. So my father was again still a chief, but Anglican. So the family again got traumatized just because my father was now again being hurtled and kicked around for having supported ALP. Now, the liberation of 1986 brought us peace at family level in much of Toronto. Even when the president got those special district administrators and made them whatever, there was a monitoring system on their performance. And when there was a great meeting in Kisoko, my uncle, who lives up to now, called James Obo, he was until recently the general manager of Lint Marketing Board. He raised the issue of why are we being fought? Why are people being handled or hurtled into lorries because they're Anglican? The president came up with a directive, and that directive put to rest insecurity on religious basis in Toronto. Toronto was highly polarized between the Anglicans and the Catholics. Now, I can tell you, in the time before the coming of Yoweri Museveni, my father had helped some of the young people who went to the bush from Morikiso, a place called Morikiso. My father had kept some of the businessmen in his house who were thought to be aiding the president in the bush from arrest. Why was he not arrested? Because by then he was conceived as UPC. But a UPC who works well to help the bush. There is a lot which we could talk about our parents, which the local politicians don't understand. He's not a hero by any standard. By the measure of General Tuwine's list, my father cannot be a hero. But we know that our father, the late Yokola Tanga, should have been given medals as a hero. I'm not bitter about that. The criteria of picking can be that the minister in charge of a district, minister from a district, has overriding powers. But in the heart of hearts, we know the contribution of our father. We know the insecurity that engulfed Tororo. We slept in the bushes with snakes. Once I graduated my first degree in the 80s, we could not even hold the parties because of insecurity. When I held my first degree party at home, all my brothers took off because I was bringing war. People would come and kill us. We slept in the bushes near snakes. I and my parents would leave home in the evening. And once we reach where our cattle grazes, we all take different directions. I slept in the bush for about 3 months at different intervals. So when people talk about the peace ushered in, when people talk about insecurity in Uganda, and people talk about it from a cosmetic angle, I feel I have a bleeding heart. I was a student in Kampala here, HSC. I was in Makerere High School. Between Uganda Teachers Association building and Wandegea, you'll find bodies littered in Obote region. You'll hear gunfire, and when you walk, you find people have been killed. You ask yourself, why have they been killed? Someone is killed because he could not surrender his wristwatch to a soldier. He could not surrender his good shirt to a soldier. Soldiers, the military had become synonymous with wild animals. That you see a soldier, you run up to when your legs can carry. When people belittle Museveni, President Museveni, when people say don't tell us about the Bush War, don't tell us about Uganda's history, I feel Uganda's history must be taught to everybody. Once the constitution, the preamble to the constitution talks about the history of Uganda having been in darkness for so many years and destruction, people think it was a play. No part of Uganda did not feel the effects of bad governance up to 1986. Between 1986 to 1988, we still had some fallback positions. People were falling back, doing what was there in the past, even when we belonged in the new system. But they could be apprehended. But those days, people could be killed, and no one could talk about those people killed. In the Amin era, I was in Jinja Secondary School, and you saw people killed, and no one would account for people killed. Today, at least investigation will be carried out, and some people will be apprehended. Yes, the system might not be perfect, but we have moved a long way, ladies and gentlemen. Ugandans who are watching UBC, if you are Ugandan of 55 years, you have a story to tell. If you are Ugandan of 60 years and above, with all sincerity, whether you are in FDC, DP, NRM, any other political party, you have to tell a sincere historical account, historical episode, historical background of what Uganda was. It was painful. It was shambles. At 2 o'clock, we were living like apartheid South Africa. 2 to 3 in apartheid South Africa until 1994, Africans would have left the town. The siren would go in every town at 2, the final siren would go at 3. Any African found in town in apartheid South Africa there would be imprisoned for life. This is how Kampala City was. If you lived in Kampala City up to 3 p.m., if you didn't leave, then you'll actually be judging whether you want life or death. Because vagabonds will take over the city, especially downtown. Lubiri Barracks was a menace. I used to stay with my uncle in Rubaga Road, S5, S6. But every evening you would see soldiers carrying loot. And you would say, we have looted Baganda. Not that we've looted Ugandans, we have looted Baganda. The country was polarized on ethnic grounds. It was polarized on religious ground. And it was not anything to be called a sovereign state. It was largely having the characteristics of a failed state. 1986 is the real liberation. 26 January 1986 goes down as one of the best days to mark in Tororo. Why Tororo? Tororo should have held many liberation days. Tororo is the junction point of all trajectories. It is a border town, so those who are fleeing for their life to Kenya would actually either use Busia, but mostly Malaba in Tororo. The communities along the border areas of Tororo, Mela, Kwapa, helped to rescue so many people who are fleeing. They were either fleeing through Mbale, so you have to pass Kwapa, either Malaba, you'll pass through Malaba, or they will flee through Nagongera. Communities, people were fleeing. People were looking for every possible route to get out of the middle of roads or near roads and towns. Tororo did not support any rebel activity. I can tell you. Tororo had vagabonds who would waylay trailers and would call themselves Foba as you go to Malaba, Mela, Orioi, after Manjas High School. But these were not organized group to call rebels. They were just people who had mobilized themselves, they had acquired arms for smuggling, they were whaling trucks, and they were projecting themselves as a rebel movement. The only force that came was when Agra Wall and his system came to eliminate LOCs, the resistance councillors. That's when at least there was a bit of tension in Tororo. And when Lakwena moved through parts of Tororo into Busoga. But Lakwena could not get sanctuary in Tororo because the people would say, get out of our place, we don't want security. We want to live in our poverty but without security. So Tororo has never, in the history of this country, had rebel movements pitched camp and fighting this government like other parts. So Tororo should be celebrated. Once Tororo is a junction town, it helped people flee. Tororo contributed the late Odoi Chwale, the late, the other, who joined the NRA, or major family in the Namwaya. We lost people who joined the NRA. So celebrating in Tororo was and is to me a welcome issue. Second, when we celebrate Liberation Day, it tends to open up the rural country to the Ugandan public. The people who did not know Muafu in the constituency of Honorable Botoboto, deep, very deep, I can tell you, get ready to drive, it's really deep, will now know that that's part of Uganda. The mother of the Secretary General, Kasule Lumumba, comes from that side. And people may be on the no Secretary General when she goes to see the mother, or where the mother comes from. But now they are going to celebrate a Liberation Day, a national Heroes Day, in a remote setting. It now projects that place differently. The post-liberation projection of that place will be different from what it was. So I'm very happy that at last we are not in a town. We have gone to where the NRM voters live. The town is where the riffraff of society live. The riffraff of society in social history is not an abusive word. It's simply to describe a community that lives in town, not so educated, but intelligent. A community that lives in town, not so educated, but which questions the working of government. And most of them tend to be opposition. But when you go to the rural area like Muafu in West Budama South, where the liberation is going to be, the celebration is going to be staged, you have gone to the real, true Ugandans who actually produce little that they produce to support the economy and to support the government. So I find value in this celebration being taken to Tororo first, where I come from, and to the rural area second, where the people live. I want to applaud the heroes who will be medaled, that once the heroes are medaled, given accolades, it gives us a new chapter to start and move and to be recognized further. Once the poverty levels in that area is exposed, it calls to question what government can do to liberate them from poverty. Government has liberated all of us by giving us a conducive environment. You can say the air we breathe belongs to God, but once that air is polluted by poor politics, you can't breathe it. NRM has purified that air. Now we are breathing good air, we have sanity, we walk with our heads high, and we can develop in our own way. It is not the responsibility of any government to give money, seed money, to everyone for the pocket. It is the responsibility of any civilized government to give an enabling environment where people should work for their betterment of their social index. I find NRM to have done that better off compared to any post-independence government.